All right, good morning and welcome to the Chamber's Celebration of Logistics webinar series. This is the last in a month-long series promoting the appreciation and the important role that the logistics industry plays. The Celebration of Logistics is a new program for us here at the Chamber of Commerce, replacing what many of us remember and know as the State of Trade and Transportation, and of course, World Trade Week events and programming. We really appreciate you being with us this morning. My name is Jeremy Harris. I'm the president and CEO of the Long Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. And we're so thankful to have our guest speaker presenting this morning. Before I get there, though, a couple of housekeeping issues I want to go over for our presentation today. We want to encourage everyone who's joined us to please use that Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. We'll save all these questions towards the end. If you've got them, though, as we go through the presentation, feel free to queue them up as we go. This webinar is being recorded and it's going to be distributed to all registrants, chamber members, sponsors, and other folks who are involved themselves in the logistics community. I want to start by giving a big thank you to Moffitt & Nichol, our title sponsor of this entire series. Without them, we could not produce this program, and they've been with us for a very, very long time as a member and also as part of our leadership here, not just in the chamber, but of course in the community. So we'd like to also thank our major sponsors. We appreciate their support as well. First of all, our series sponsor for the entire Celebration of Logistics series, the Port of Long Beach. Our gold sponsors, AES, Dignity Health, St. Mary Medical Center, Hawaiian Airlines, Long Beach Airport, Marathon, Mitsubishi Cement, Southwest Airlines, and Turkish Airlines. Now, let's get back to thanking our title sponsor, Moffitt & Nichol, with a short video from Moffitt & Nichol.
Long Beach Container Terminal, commonly referred to as the Middle Harbor Redevelopment Project, has been 12 years in the making. It is currently the most significant maritime project in North America. And not only is it the most technologically advanced container terminal in North America, it is the cleanest container terminal on the planet. And we're proud of that.
Moffitt & Nichol's been part of the project from day one. The master planning of the terminal, laying it out, looking at the modes of operation, the infrastructure required to support that operation. Throughout this project, one of the key things that I've learned is the importance of teamwork and collaboration, bringing both parties together to understand the design side and to understand the operations side.
And that's the good thing about our partnership, is that Moffitt & Nichol, they've been there from the beginning, for the long haul, and they will be there at the very end. And that partnership has been invaluable to Long Beach Container Terminal.
I want to thank Moffitt & Nichol once again for, their support and their partnership in this series. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Dr. Noel Hasagawa. Many of you know Dr. Hasagawa already, and many of you were probably expecting a different speaker this morning, and we had to, that ever-changing word, pivot in our world as we had a last-minute cancellation. But we're really grateful to have Dr. Noel Hasagawa with us this morning. Somebody who's a friend to all of us, certainly a friend to the logistics community. He serves as the Deputy Executive Director and COO of the Port of Long Beach. He also has more than 24 years of leadership experience in both the public and private sectors, including the last 11 years at the Port of Long Beach. As Deputy Executive Director, COO, Dr. Hasagawa is responsible for managing the day-to-day administration and operations of the nation's second largest port. He has undergraduate and graduate degrees in business and economic planning from USC and earned his doctorate from the University of La Verne. He currently serves on the boards of various industry and nonprofit boards, including the Marine Exchange of Southern California, my apologies, and the Intermodal Association of North America, where he serves as chairman of the board. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Noel Hasagawa, our friend from the Port of Long Beach. Noel, it's all yours. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and hello to all of you. It's a pleasure to join you today, and I want to thank the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce and IBA for assembling this forum. I happen to believe that we don't recognize or celebrate logistics often enough. So I really appreciate the opportunity that you're giving the Port of Long Beach to be able to provide this update in celebration of logistics. You know, I like to say that goods movement is literally the economy in motion. When you consider all the jobs that are created, the business that it supports, all the investments and capital investments, as you saw in the short video by Moffitt & Nichol, there's a lot of economic stimulus that is happening. And I happen to believe that goods movement, supply chain logistics will play a vital role in the economic recovery in this post-pandemic reality. What I thought I'd share with all of you is to provide a perspective of what we've experienced as a port and as a broader supply chain over the past year, and what our outlook is going into the future. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Port of Long Beach, which I assume is probably the minority, let me just take you here through a quick snapshot and profile of who we are. Globally, we're recognized as the 9th busiest port complex, and typically ports around the world view the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach as one complex, known as a San Pedro Bay complex. And internationally, we rank as the 9th busiest port complex in the world. Last year, between the two ports, we handled about 18 million container units. And this year, as you'll hear me describe in more detail, we're on pace to break even more records. Here's one of my favorite views of our port. This is the vantage point from our beautiful city. You can see some of our major terminals out in the outer harbor. And the relationship we have with our city, our community, is just a very solid one that we've invested over many years to solidify and strengthen. Certainly the Long Beach Chamber of Commerce and IBA have been partners with us in ensuring that. When you look at our top trade partners, no surprise, given our close proximity to Asia, China far and away accounts for the vast majority of our import cargo, and that's closely followed by countries like South Korea and Japan and Taiwan. We have seen a shift that's been in motion now for a decade or so, and that's the manufacturing shift from China to Southeast Asia. We expect that to continue, especially on the heels of the US-China trade war that took place a couple of years ago, and certainly the pandemic and all the uncertainty and disruption that created. So, but yet the story here is China by far our largest trade partner. And it's also the case on the export side of the house. You'll see that China again is a huge consumer of US goods. And you'll see that again is followed by countries like Taiwan and South Korea, Vietnam. On the next couple of slides, you'll see what these commodities are. When we talk about imports, we're talking about furniture and electronics, auto and apparel, footwear, a lot of the things that you customarily see on the store shelves when you go shopping. You'll note that the box says made in China or made in Taiwan. Chances are that that box came into our port. In fact, as a gateway between the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, we account for about 40% of America's waterborne imports. So this is a massive gateway, a major gateway for imports. So what do we do on the export side? What is it that we send overseas? A lot of waste paper, a lot of products that are used in the manufacturing processes overseas to convert and manufacture items that are eventually sent our way in the form of imports. So you'll see here a lot of raw materials, products, plastics, machinery, and all of this supports, again, US-based businesses, small businesses. And one of the things that we certainly support and advocate for is a strong export initiative that will support US-based businesses, including those that are located just in our region. So let's talk about the numbers. You may note that in 2018, we set an all-time record. For the very first time in our history, we eclipsed the 8 million container unit mark, or TEU mark. In 2019, that regressed to more like a normal year, and in large part that was a result of the US-China trade war. All those tariffs impacted trade, specifically in the Trans-Pacific, and we were disproportionately impacted. But you'll see that in 2020, we once again set a new record, once again eclipsing the 8 million TEU mark and setting a new record in 2020, which is really surprising because when you look at our volumes in 2020, and if you just focus in the months between January and December, you'll see that in the early days of the pandemic, when the pandemic was impacting Asia and China principally, you'll see that manufacturing overseas was effectively shut down. We felt the effect of that 2 weeks later, and in fact, our volumes in January through April, you'll see here, steep declines, year over year, monthly steep declines. May was an anomaly, but once manufacturing resumed in China, and once the pandemic had cleared and the supply chain in Asia restarted, you saw all that pent-up supply, and you saw as we consumers here in the US were confined to our homes, and our spending transitioned from services to goods, and online shopping, e-commerce took off. You started seeing the resurgence of cargo, and that's what, in fact, we started seeing and noticing in July. So, as I like to say, what we see here is we went from doom and gloom in the beginning of 2020 to fast and furious, which commenced in July, and it hasn't let up since. In fact, that cargo surge that commenced in July is still ongoing. We're still managing through that record-setting pace in cargo volumes. And that is what catapulted us to our best year on record in 2020 at 8.11 million TEUs. Of course, the best part is that in 2022 or 2021, this year, we're already on pace and on track to reach the 9 million mark, which would be the first time that our port ever reaches such a peak in cargo volume. So certainly very excited about that, what that could represent for the economy and goods movement in general. Now, this slide here, I like to share, especially when I'm talking to folks in our community, because the port represents different things to different people. One of the things that should not be lost on anyone is that we're a massive economic engine. And when you look at the positive economic impact of our port in our city, that's 51,000 jobs across the region of Southern California, nearly 600,000 jobs. And even across the nation, you're talking about 2.6 million jobs. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of tax revenue. That's a positive economic impact. And again, for me, the goods movement industry is literally the economy in motion. And our port is going to play a pivotal role in the economic recovery here in the US and in our local economies. When you translate that into the national impact, obviously the numbers are even more staggering and more impressive. I mean, there's almost 31 million jobs that our industry, that logistics supports on an annual basis. That translates into more than $5.4 trillion in total economic impact. That's a lot of positive impact that our economy nationally is enjoying as a result of logistics and goods movement. So we're trying our very best each and every day to not just sustain our position in the marketplace, but build on that so that we can continue to generate jobs and stimulate the economy and continue providing a positive economic impact. Our value proposition, given our close proximity to Asia, is our transit time. We're closer than most other gateways across the US. And you'll see here on the slide that if you compare our intermodal gateway with the Panama Canal route, you'll see that we're 11 days faster on average. That is a huge competitive advantage when you look at transit time and the carrying costs of goods and the number of days that a container and the goods that they carry sit on a ship. Another competitive advantage of our gateway is our access to Class 1 rail trains. You'll see here that between UP and BNSF, there are at least 75 weekly train departures. No other gateway in America has this capacity. And this is going to be important in the slides ahead as I describe how we partner with the railroads to make sure that goods make their way to their destination in the interior of the United States. Here's another competitive advantage. The nearly 2 billion square feet of distribution facilities and warehouse space just within 75 miles of our port. You probably are aware that even before the pandemic, e-commerce was already projected to double within 5 years. The pandemic had the effect of taking that trend that was already in motion and accelerating that. I believe that people during the pandemic that got used to shopping from the comfort of their own homes are going to continue to do that. And e-commerce has the effect of making the supply chain tighter and making it more susceptible to time, just in time production and so forth. So having access to warehouses and distribution center space is critical. Now, having said that, back in 2017, our gateway was ranked number 9 across the globe. 10 years before that, we were number 5 on the global roster of ports. If you go back to 2000, we were number 3. And what you see here is a pattern where we are growing, but we're not growing as fast as some of these other markets around the globe are growing. So we want to make sure that we build on our value proposition. We want to make sure that our slice of the pie continues to grow at the same pace or at a greater pace in some of these other markets, because we want to continue supporting logistics and our economy. So here's the thing. The only way we're going to be able to do that is to understand that what got us here is not what's going to get us there. The world has changed. The post-pandemic world has created a new paradigm, a new landscape in more ways than one. And this is something that I believe that we as a Port Authority and as a port community here in Long Beach have embraced. Many of you know that we've been pioneers on many fronts, the environment, infrastructure, of more recently operational excellence. And in order for us to continue to seize on that momentum and continue to build on our value proposition, our intent is to continue to work our way to earn our tagline, which is the port of choice. So here's a question. With all the changes in the industry in recent years, bigger ships, bigger vessel alliances, changes in geopolitics, shifts in trade policies, how are we going to approach this? Well, we see it as an opportunity. And for example, when you look at the evolution of these massive ships, what you see here on the slide is an 18,000 TEU container ship called the CMA CGM Benjamin Franklin. Back in 2017, this was the largest ship ever to call a North American seaport. Now, in case you're wondering, not every ship looks like this. Most of the time, the boxes come in different colors with different brands, but this is a beautiful snapshot of what was then the largest ship to call a North American seaport. And in case you're wondering how big a ship like this is, let me just walk you through some schematics. It's as tall as 20-story building. So if you ever get on one of these ships, suggest you take the elevator. It's as wide as a 12-lane freeway. It's as long as 4 football fields. So you can literally score 4 touchdowns going from one end of the ship to the next. And here's my wife's favorite metric. It's roomy enough to accommodate 90 million pairs of shoes. I mean, these ships are massive. And by the way, these are not the largest that are in service today. We've had ships as large as 23,000 TEU in capacity call our port already. So these ships have gotten massively larger, while our footprint and our capacity at the port has not kept up with that growth. And again, this is why it's critical that we do everything we can as quickly as we can to accommodate these changes and this growing capacity on the water. Another change are the new ocean carrier alliances that are about 4 or 5 years old now. And what this did is it concentrated the number of ocean carriers into large clusters or groups that now dominate the Trans-Pacific trade lane and all the trade lanes in the world. At one point, there were well over 25 major shipping lines on the global roster. Today, it's down to about 12. And that consolidation was sparked by the evolution of ships and their interest in maximizing economies of scale. And that then triggered this formation of these alliances. Now, the effect that has on ports like ours is that it has dispersed cargo across the terminals. You'll see here where each of these alliances call. When you look at the terminals in Los Angeles and Long Beach, you'll see how the cargo is dispersed across the bay. So this brings me to the topic of complexity. I mean, the supply chain, we like to talk about the supply chain as this uniform umbrella term, right? That the supply chain is one system, but it's a system made up of systems. And in reality, the system is made up of discrete business units and business entities that are not mutually aligned. And what I mean by that is you'll notice here on this simple chart that the financial relationships between the different segments in the supply chain are unilateral. And in many cases, for example, the shipper, the Target, the Walmart, the Home Depot that pays the shipping line to bring a container from Asia here to the US through Long Beach, they don't have a direct contractual relationship with the terminal operator. But that's where they send their trucking company to pick up a container that they paid the shipping line to transport from Asia. So you see the complexity there and the potential for misalignment. And this is one of the areas that in recent years, we as a port authority, as a landlord port, have gotten more interested, more engaged in. Another change is, of course, Amazon and e-commerce, the disruption across the supply chain. We've all become accustomed to getting our products as quickly as possible. Under Amazon Prime, you could even conceivably get it within the same day that you ordered it. So that's created a need for speed, a need for velocity. So what have we done? Well, we've realigned our role as a landlord port to meet these industry changes and stay ahead of the competition. Let me give you an illustration. This is a picture of a pit stop at an Indy 500 race in 2013. Back in 1950, in the Indianapolis 500, a pit stop crew took 67 seconds to change out the 4 tires of a race car. That was in 1950, 67 seconds. That was fast. In 2013, this pit stop crew changed out the tires and got this car ready to re-enter the race within 3 seconds. And that's how fast this pit stop crew was able to do that. In many ways, our industry has to realign. We have to readapt to the changing environment. And velocity is key, fluidity is key, predictability, reliability, all these words that we hear that our shippers request and demand are words that we're working hard to meet on a daily basis. So we're going through a systems upgrade. And the role we play is that of a convener and facilitator. We need to make sure that everyone's talking to each other. We need to make sure that we're sharing information. We also do our part in enabling innovation and encouraging our partners to apply emerging technologies, all in an effort to enhance velocity, create value for the end user. During the pandemic, we also played a key role in keeping our workforce safe, our waterfront workers, ILWU, longshore workers, making sure our employees at the Port Authority were safe. They had PPE, there was adequate testing. We advocated all levels of government to ensure that goods movement and supply chain were exempted as an essential service. And I'm pleased to say that we did not shut down a single day, even at the height of the pandemic. We kept the economy going, we kept the supply chain moving, and that was critical to make sure that PPE and medical equipment made its way to its destination through our port. This COVID-19 testing site, since last August, has performed well over 23,000 tests. And it's right there on the waterfront. We made it available to make sure that our waterfront workers had access to these tests. We also facilitated, working in partnership with our city, the state of California, facilitated vaccinations for our ILWU dock workers. Another example of how we responded is when the surge commenced in July, our terminals were literally bursting at the seams. We needed to make some room available to provide relief to our terminals. And this is what we did here at Pure S. We call it Project Store, short-term overflow resource. This is a 40-acre site that we stood up to support our terminals and make sure that they could accommodate those ships that were waiting on the water to get those containers to shore. Another example of how we acted quickly. We provided and produced and provided weekly this report that provides visibility to all of our partners about our volumes, vessel calls, and what they can expect so that they can plan their equipment and their resources accordingly. Our terminals and our shipping lines themselves have stepped up. Shipping lines today have gotten a lot more disciplined at how they load a ship at the port of origin. They do it in a way that makes it a lot easier and seamless when that ship arrives here at the port of destination. They employ block stowage or sequential loading, which means that the boxes that are to be discharged from the ship here at destination are prioritized. So credit to our shipping lines. Our terminals have stepped up. They've developed an appointment system for our truckers, a reservation system that injects predictability to that transaction. Many of our terminals in Long Beach, I'm proud to say, have really taken this to the next level, and they're performing high levels of dual transactions, which means that a truck that goes to our port to pick up a load in the same transaction, in that same truck visit, drops off a load. And that two-way transaction really is the pinnacle of efficiency. And our terminals are doing as many as 70% of their moves are dual transactions. Gate management continues to be one of our initiatives that we're constantly working with our terminals to improve. The appointment system I just described is one of the ways that our terminals are stepping up the game these days because of the vast surge that we're managing. Our terminals are maximizing gate hours. They're staying as open as much as they can to be able to handle this cargo surge. So credit to our terminal operators for doing that. Our chassis providers are also stepping up, injecting new assets to do their part to make sure that fluidity is staying on course. Of course, technology plays a key role. LBCT, that was highlighted in the video you saw before this presentation, they've been employing API since last year. An API is basically a way that connects the terminal's operating system with a truck driver's operating system. And it makes the creation, cancellation, and grouping of appointments seamless, easy, and it automates it. ITS, another one of our terminals, is already employing predictive availability. This gives our shippers and their trucking companies the ability to book appointments 5 days before the ship arrives. So these are just some examples of how we're building on our value proposition, how we are striving as a port to earn that distinction, port of choice. But we're also investing aggressively. In fact, over the last 10 years, the Port of Long Beach led and executed the largest CapEx program of any port in North America, over $4 billion. Over the next 10 years, we're on track to invest another $1.7 billion. And what are we doing? Well, we're building bridges like this that is now a new iconic view here in our city. We unveiled this last fall. We call it the Bridge to Everywhere because goods that transit this bridge on a daily basis reach all 435 congressional districts in the country. LBCT, which was highlighted in the video, is weeks away from full completion. This terminal by itself will have the capacity of the 4th largest port in the US and will be the most advanced facility and terminal operation that is going to be zero emissions. And finally, we're spending and investing aggressively on rail. Why? As our volumes continue to grow, the most efficient, sustainable way to move containers out of our port to destination is via rail. In fact, we estimate that one train can replace at least 750 trucks. And as trains have gotten longer, we estimate that that figure is much larger as well. So we're investing aggressively. We continue to build, we continue to expand capacity and look for ways to accommodate more cargo. Finally, I want to end by bringing all this together because the supply chain, logistics is part of a global supply chain. When we went through the US-China trade war, we here in Southern California were whipsawed just because given our close proximity to Asia. But just to illustrate how interconnected we are as a supply chain, the image you see here are aluminum ingots, which are manufactured in a smelting plant in Canada. They're then transported to a plant in Kentucky where they're converted into rolls. Once they're converted into rolls, they're transported to Mexico to an auto assembly plant where those rolls are converted into the bodies of these vehicles. Those cars, in turn, are transported back up to the US, where consumers like you and I can buy them. So as you can see, the global supply chain is beyond a bilateral relationship between two countries. It really crosses across many countries, many continents. And what happened recently at the Suez Canal is another illustration. The blockage that lasted, thankfully, only 6 days sent ripple effects across the entire global supply chain. Had that blockage lasted more days, we would have felt the impact here in Long Beach. That's how interconnected the global supply chain is. So this leads me to this point. Given the massive cargo surge that we've been managing this year and last year, we think it's time that we have a serious conversation of what it will take to transition the entire supply chain. I'm not just talking about ports in our terminal, I'm talking about the entire supply chain. What will it take to transition to a 24/7 hour supply chain? We already have companies like Amazon that are 24/7. The railroads are 24/7. In fact, ports in Asia, their supply chains, manufacturing, trucking, ports, they're already 24/7. And let me put this in perspective for you. In Asia, there are 15 ports. 7 of those 15 are in the top 10 in terms of capacity and throughput. Here on the US West Coast, basically we have 4 major gateways. So when you think about a supply chain that's 24/7, that has outbound ports, you have 15 of them, and all those ships and all that cargo is making its way to essentially 4 entry points here on the US West Coast. And if we're not 24/7, we're not going to be able to accommodate all that cargo with the same fluidity and velocity that our shippers expect and demand. Now, I'm not suggesting that 24/7 is going to happen tomorrow or next month or next year. Certainly, there are a lot of considerations. There's a lot that needs to be reviewed and explored. But this is something that we need to start thinking about. What will it take? What are those barriers? And what can each of us do, depending on where we sit in the logistics chain, to ensure that we have that conversation? And secondly, we have to think about the broader supply chain, warehouses, distribution centers. Keep in mind that all this massive cargo surge is happening at a time when COVID safety protocols have effectively tightened capacity as well. So this is something, that I wanted to leave you with as a final note. And Jeremy, I want to thank you again and the Chamber and IBA for the opportunity. Happy to take any questions.
Noel, thank you for that. Really appreciate it. A lot of great stats and a wonderful overview on everything that's happening right here in our own backyard in terms of keeping not just the local economy, but really the regional and the national, if not worldwide economy going, especially last year with everything that happened. We've got a few questions coming in, Noel, and I'll start off with a couple to kind of get it going here. You talked early on in your presentation about the 31 million approximately jobs created by cargo in general. I know we worked together with the port and with CSULB a few years ago about what does that number mean to the local economy in Long Beach or the regional economy. 1 in 7, I think, is what the number was batted about at one point. Any update there and what that number looks like here locally?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Jeremy. The latest update shows that port activity generates 1 out of 5 jobs in the city of Long Beach. That's over 500,000 jobs. And certainly when we have capital programs like we have over the past decades, that generates even more high-paying construction jobs, for example. So I'm very proud of that.
Absolutely. That's great. Another slide you talked about the top global ports in the world and how over time you've seen Long Beach kind of move down the list a little bit with our partners in LA, of course. What do you think? Well, I mean, the overall answer is what attributes to why we're moving down, but what can be done, you think, to get us back in, whether it's the top 5 or remain in the top 10? Because you're seeing, obviously, those folks in front of us from China mainly, they're accelerating their capacity. What can what can be done on our side, whether it's throughout the U.S. or here locally?
In one word, Jeremy, it's competitiveness, right? How do we keep our edge, and how do we build our value proposition so that we maintain our ranking in the market? The story, when you look at the rankings and how we as a complex have slipped since the year 2000, is a story of how the economies in Asia have grown, right? They've become manufacturing hubs. They're manufacturing more, they're producing more, they've got more to export. So that's part of the story. But the other part of the story is, as these ports and these manufacturing hubs overseas have grown, there hasn't been commensurate growth here in the U.S. Certainly other gateways in the U.S. are investing in their infrastructure. They're trying to maintain their competitiveness as well. But that's the reason why over the last 10 years, we've invested over $4 billion. That's why we're investing another $1.7 billion over the next 10 years. That's why our focus on operational excellence is right in front of us. That's what we're doing, Jeremy. We're trying to build our value proposition. We're trying to deliver velocity, reliability, predictability to our shippers. That's the name of the game. That's how we stay relevant, and that's how we maintain our competitive edge.
Absolutely. No, that's great points, Noel. Thank you for that. Question from one of our folks here viewing this webinar. They talk about, great to hear about the growth that, that chart that we saw or slide we saw. Do you happen to know, Noel, prior to 2021, what year was it that we were projected to reach that 9 million TEU mark? I know you had a nice chart that showed how we got up to 8.1 and then on our way to 9, but some of that accelerated due to the pandemic. Any idea where that 9 million mark might have been before the pandemic or projected?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. In fact, it's pretty close. It lines up pretty closely to our most recently updated cargo forecast. As all of you know, we produce these forecasts regularly because we need to make sure that we're right sizing and aligning our investments to future market demand. The Great Recession prompted us to reevaluate our latest forecast, but we're looking at a 20 million TEU mark here over the next couple of years. And as I mentioned, Jerry, we're going to get very close to that this year. So we're very much in line with our latest forecast, and the future is bright. If the economic recovery in the U.S. continues at a healthy clip, if inflation can be managed, and if folks go back to work, right now there's about 8 million people that are still unemployed. If we can get those people to go back to work, if businesses regain confidence in the economy, they continue to invest and hire people, that all bodes well for our economy, and it's going to bode well for logistics and goods movement.
Sure. No, great points there as well. And, sticking along with, increasing capacity and the amount that we're seeing through our port, we'll shift gears just a little bit here, Noel, and talk a little bit about policy and regulations that are coming. I know you're familiar, and we certainly are here at the Chamber, about the new air quality regs that were just passed regarding the warehousing sector. This question comes from one of our registrants here. What do you think that policy or that adoption of that policy might have an impact on the industry?
We take a very holistic approach when it comes to policy and regulation, Jeremy. I mean, it's important for us, I think, as a port community, if you will, to make sure that we're educating our policymakers when it comes to the bigger picture. I think we've earned, as a port, an excellent reputation. We were the very, very first green port, not just in the nation, not just in the world, and I like to say in the galaxy, right? And over the course of that time, we've demonstrated that we can grow our business while growing grain. And that resume cannot be contested. In fact, other ports in the U.S., around the world, are trying to do the same thing. They're now mimicking a lot of the initiatives and efforts that we undertook. So we're very proud of that. I think what's important here is that when it comes to policy making, policy setting, it's incumbent on us to educate, to make sure that our policymakers make the connections between supply chain, emissions, jobs, investments, because it's all interconnected. And we certainly are doing our part. I think many of you and your members are aware that recently we took another bold step in pursuing the latest iteration of the Clean Truck program. We continue to raise the bar when it comes to our Clean Air Action Plan, right? Zero emissions being the next frontier. It's already here. Zero emissions cargo handling equipment by 2030, zero emissions trucks by 2035. So we're doing our part, Jeremy, but we're doing it in a responsible way. We're working with industry. We're working with the stakeholders. We want to be reasonable, right? We want to do something that's not going to hold our industry back. We want to do it in a way that enables them to be successful. So that's going to continue to be our approach. We want to be extremely collaborative. We have excellent working relationships, certainly with our stakeholders, and also with our policymakers and regulators. So we will continue that.
Yeah, we agree with you here at the Chamber, Noel. The port has been, the Long Beach port certainly has been the example for folks across the country and across the world on how to do this right. So appreciate that hard work in that area. Going back to another slide question here is store at Pier S. You talked about how you guys moved quickly to help out with the overflow and find more capacity. Is there any plans for long-term storage, whether it's there or anywhere else within the port? And can you elaborate on any of that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you and the chamber as well for your partnership over the years. I mean, because it takes that partnership, takes collaboration. In answer to your question, Project Store was developed as a short-term, near-term solution.
Mm-hmm.
The way we were able to get it up so quickly is we were able to do it under the auspices of the emergency order that the governor of California introduced. Beyond the short term, Jeremy, we've been having discussions about what is the need and what will be the need in the years ahead. We're still having those discussions. If cargo flows continue trending the way they have, there may be a need. I mean, we're always surveying the market and we're trying to assess demand. If the demand is there, there is a potential that we will continue to offer land for such a use, but we will certainly follow all the regs and all the steps that are required as part of CEQA. But yeah, I mean, we're constantly tracking the market and making sure that our investments, whether they're near or long term, are in line with that market demand.
Sure. No, that's great points. Appreciate the answer to that. I want to remind folks watching us live on this webinar, if you've got questions, please use that Q&A feature here at the end. We're coming up on time here in a little bit, so a couple more questions for you, Noel, and then I'll let you kind of wrap it up or summarize anything that you want to leave us with. Another question is, obviously in Washington, D.C. right now, the administration is talking a lot about infrastructure and funding around infrastructure funding. Is the port at the table? Is the port working with our local congressional leaders about, how some of that funding can come our way? And if so, you showed a slide about, the investment from the port on infrastructure projects or capital projects coming in the next 10 years. Any comments or questions around that?
Absolutely, Jeremy. We just wrapped up a round of advocacy meetings with representatives at the administration, both houses of Congress, as well as different agencies. We certainly want to be at the front of the line when it comes to opportunities for funding, for example. We think we have an excellent story to tell. Over the years, we've invested wisely. We've invested some of our own money, and we're able to form strategic partnerships with the federal government and the state. And so we think we have a great story, a great resume, and we'll continue to pursue those opportunities. I'll tell you what, I'm very excited and very optimistic about an infrastructure bill. I think it's something that we've been needing for quite some time. And here's the reason why. We as a port have invested over $4 billion over the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. But if those investments are not matched in the interior, in the corridors that take that cargo either via truck power or rail power, they're not going to be maximized. And that's the story we tell our representatives in Congress, that we need their support. We need a national freight plan and strategy. We need to look at what countries like Canada are doing and how they're taking a holistic approach to their investments to make sure that the dots are being connected and they're fully maximizing those impacts. That's our story, and that's what we're saying. We're also emphasizing rail. Rail is critical for a gateway like ours. We are an intermodal gateway, and to the extent that we can move more containers via rail, we all benefit. It's faster, it's cleaner, it's more sustainable, and that's another message that we're leaving with our representatives in DC and also in Sacramento.
Oh, that's great. And we've got one last question here, and it goes along with the infrastructure. You talked about how the ships continue to get bigger and bigger. Is the port ready to receive those bigger ships? And I know this goes along with dredging and some of the infrastructure dollars that are going to be needed for some of that. Any comments there?
We're ready, Jeremy, and let them come. LBCT can handle up to 24,000 TEU ships. TTI can handle up to 21,000 TEU ships. And we're working hard every day to make sure we can accommodate the largest ships in service.
Excellent. Well, Noel, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to give you a minute here if you want to summarize anything that our folks that are watching today, many of them are in the logistics and goods movement. Of course, our leadership on IBA and some of our leadership from the board here, and some small businesses that are watching this today. I think everybody's very aware of what the port does. I think they learned a little bit more today, exactly the impact of the port and what it means, not just here to Long Beach, but across the world. Anything you want to leave us to summarize today's presentation?
I want to thank all of you. It really took each and every one of us to do our part to get us through the pandemic. Something that we had never, ever before seen, that we could never, ever have imagined or planned for. And the fact that we were able to pull through, keep our waterfront workers safe, handle the largest cargo surge on record, and the fact that we're talking about this now and pointing to all the successes is a great story about how we all came together. So I want to thank each and every one of you for doing your part, and that includes the chamber. And my last message is, let's continue working together. It's going to take the entire port community to really maximize the value proposition of our port. And we're certainly very excited. There's a lot of exciting momentum at the Port of Long Beach, and we welcome everyone's participation in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much once again for doing this for us and opening up, again, with how much the port means to just us here in Long Beach. And sometimes I think we forget about, what it really means for our local economy. So again, thanks for sharing that with us today. Thanks for joining our series in such a late last minute and again, pulling through for us. I want to thank all of our participants, our folks that are registered today and viewing this, for joining our webinar. I want to give another big thank you to our title sponsor, Moffitt and Nickel. Again, we couldn't do it without you. Again, to Noel and the Port of Long Beach for our series sponsor. We appreciate all the support you've given the Chamber over the years. And quite frankly, many folks here in the community. The Port does an excellent job of reaching back into the community and supporting nonprofits and various small businesses throughout Long Beach. If you've got any more questions that unfortunately weren't able to be answered, send them our way. We'll connect you with Noel at the Port and get those answered for you. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a recap email about this program and the entire series, along with the recording and all of the information today. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Long Beach. Thank you so much.